بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه، اللهم اغفر لآبائنا وأمهاتنا ومشايخنا أصحاب الحقوق علينا، اللهم آمين. We're still continuing our journey with Kitab al-Nawawi, and we have reached the Hadith number 19. And this Hadith is a very famous Hadith. It's called Hadith al-Ghulam, and the Ghulam here is Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. فعن أبي العباس عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال: كنت خلف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يوما، فقال لي: يا غلام، إني أعلمك كلمات، احفظ الله يحفظك، احفظ الله تجده تجاهك، إذا سألت فاسأل الله، وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله، واعلم أن الأمة لو اجتمعت على أن ينفعوك بشيء لم ينفعوك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله لك، وإن اجتمعوا على أن يضروك بشيء لم يضروك إلا بشيء قد كتبه الله عليك، رفعت الأقلام وجفت الصحف. رواه الترمذي وقال حديث حسن صحيح، صححه الشيخ الألباني في صحيح الترمذي. وفي خارج الترمذي عند الإمام أحمد في المسند قال: احفظ الله تجده أمامك، تعرف إلى الله في الرخاء يعرفك في الشدة، واعلم أن ما أخطأك لم يكن ليصيبك، وما أصابك لم يكن ليخطئك، واعلم أن النصر مع الصبر، وأن الفرج مع الكرب، وأن مع العسر يسرا. صدق رسول الله. So the authority of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abu al-Abbas, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him, he said that one day I was riding behind Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And riding behind him means that both of them were riding the same camel, or the same horse, or the same donkey. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told him: O young man, I shall teach you some words of advice. Be mindful of Allah, and Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah, and you will find Him in front of you. If you ask, only ask of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you seek help, only seek help in Allah. And know that if the entire nation were together to benefit you with something, they would not be able to benefit you with anything except with something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already decreed it for you. And if the entire nation were to gather to harm you by something, they would not be able to harm you by anything except what Allah has already recorded against you. The pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. And that was narrated by Imam al-Tirmidhi, and he said it's Hasan Sahih Hadith. And Sheikh al-Albani and Sheikh Shu'aib al-Arnaout recently have also deemed the Hadith as Sahih. In another narration outside of the Sunan al-Tirmidhi and Imam Ahmad al-Musnad, Rasulullah also said, that's another narration, he said, be mindful of Allah, you will find Him in front of you. Become beloved to Allah during the times of prosperity, so that He will know you in the times of adversity. Know that what has been past you was never to befall you, and know that what has befallen you was never to have passed you by. And know that victory accompanies perseverance, relief accompanies affliction, and ease accompanies hardship. أو كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Very famous hadith, very comprehensive hadith, and that's why Imam Nawawi has put this among the 42 hadiths that he has compiled, hoping that they would be very comprehensive of the major things that you need to learn in Islam. Now, this hadith, like Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, who's different from Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya. There are two scholars who actually have similar names, but they are different. There is Ibn al-Jawzi, and there is Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, sometimes he's called Ibn Qayyim. He was one of the most known students of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn al-Jawzi is a different scholar. Ibn al-Jawzi, when he was commenting on this hadith, as Ibn Rajab reported in Jami' al-Hikam, which is an explanation of al-Nawawi, he said that when I pondered over this hadith, I basically adheshed to the point that I became even lightheaded. And I was wondering, how can somebody be ignorant of this hadith and the pearls of wisdom that have been compiled in this few words, as Rasulullah ﷺ has said. The narrator of this hadith is Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas. And we say, radiyallahu anhum. Why do we say radiyallahu anhum? Why do we say Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhum? Now we're saying anhuma, two people. Who are those two people? Al-Abbas and Abdullah. So Sayyidina Abdullah is a Sahabi. And his father is Sayyidina Abbas, he's also a Sahabi. What is the relationship between Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas and the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? His cousin, Ibn Amr, right? Because Sayyidina Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, is Amm al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, he grew alongside the Prophet ﷺ. There are many merits that have been narrated for Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, the most famous of which is the Nabi ﷺ has made a dua for him. He said, Allahumma alimhu din wa faqihu ta'wil. Oh Allah, give him knowledge and give him the understanding of the Quran. And if you open any of the known books of tafsir for Ahl Sunnah, like Tafsir al-Kathir or al-Tabari or al-Baghawi, many times you will see that the first thing they are narrating as an explanation for any ayah would be coming through Abdullah ibn Abbas. And then one of his students will be narrating the explanation, maybe like Qatada, for instance, which was one of the tabi'een and one of his famous students. So Abdullah ibn Abbas was very well known for at-tafsir. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas also, at some point of time during the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Ali, he was given the command of certain cities like Basra, and he was very mujtahid, he was very diligent in his ibadah, and towards the end of his life he actually had lost his sight, and then he died in At-Ta'if in today's Saudi Arabia. He narrated many hadith. Some scholars compare them, there are more than 1,600 hadith. He's one of the Sahaba who were very well known for narrating a lot of the hadith. That's just a quick note about the Sahabi who's the narrator of this hadith. Now we start with the hadith. So the first part of the hadith is Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas is saying he was riding behind Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the scholars took from this that it's permissible for two people to be riding the same animal, the same camel, as long as it is not very difficult for the animal. Because as Muslims, you are commanded to be gentle to anything, to all creatures, even to animals. So the scholar said, if you know that the animal can support you, then it can be two people. And this is, from the beginning of the hadith, you see a sign of the Prophet ﷺ, his tawadu, his modesty. He had somebody riding the camel, riding the horse, or riding the donkey behind him. And he is his cousin. And he is a ghulam. He said, Ya ghulam. So ghulam in the Arabic language is a boy who has not reached puberty yet. So the scholar said at that time of the hadith, he was probably like 10 years old, 11 years old. So see how Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was bringing the youth, not even the youth yet, the children, very close to him from the early ages. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is teaching us and teaching everybody who is basically trying to be a good teacher, how to start addressing people in a way that captured their attention. What was the first thing he said? He told him, Ya ghulam. So it's very important when you're trying to address somebody, when you're trying to teach something or to convey some useful knowledge to, convey him personally. And you can convey him with a nice word. He told him, Ya ghulam. Loves the tahbib, showing him that he is beloved to him. And then Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas, at that point, he has not reached the state of puberty yet. So technically we know that he has not reached the state of puberty, that means he was not accountable technically for his acts. See, it was not upon him to pray or fast or doing any of these obligatory actions. But still Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is teaching him the essence of Islam. Is teaching him the reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is teaching him how to preserve the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Teaching him how victory comes, how failure comes. Teaching him the iman in al-qadr before he reached puberty. And that's something that we many times fall into, especially when it comes with teaching our kids Islam and teaching them their religion. We say, they haven't reached puberty yet, so I'll let them live their life, I'll let them have it their way, especially here. And then when they reach puberty, then I will teach them. That's too late. Rasulullah ﷺ said, when you are teaching your kids to pray, what was the age he said you should start teaching your kids to pray? 7, and then at the age of 10, then you can actually start, if they miss it, وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهِ, right? At that point of time. And again, they haven't reached puberty. Why is that? You're training them from the young age so that they grow where the Islam and the religion and the commands of Allah are being intertwined with their flesh and blood. You can't just leave somebody to live their entire life on their own whims, living according to the society or whatever they are living, without telling them or giving them minimal information about Allah and Islam, and then you expect them once they reach puberty, then it's going to be a switch. All of a sudden, they will start preserving all the commands of Allah, they will start praying properly, they will do all the commands of Allah, they will avoid the prohibitions. This never happens. You have to put these fundamentals into your kids from a very young age, as the Rasulullah ﷺ is doing, so that they start practicing it, even before it becomes obligatory on them, so that when it is time for them, where these actions are actually obligatory, it becomes like a second nature for them. It becomes very easy for them to implement it. Now, another thing is, many times you see, yes, it might be, I've heard this from some brothers. Sometimes they say, if I'm trying to teach my kids Afkar al-Salah, that's too much. Why are they asking them to memorize a lot of the Quran? Why are they asking them to memorize some of the Afkar al-Sabah al-Misa? They are actually young. It's difficult for them. And this same kid, at the same age, they're taking all kinds of courses in physics and calculus and chemistry, and nobody is complaining, and nobody is saying this is too much for them. That's unfair. You're just treating Islam and religion, unfortunately, at a level, you're putting it at a level below the level of the secular and the ulum of dunya, which is important. You need to learn this as well. But if your kid is able to comprehend and to follow these kind of sciences, it's not going to be very difficult for them also to learn about the basics of Islam. I'm not saying you should teach them usul al-fiqh, I'm not saying advanced things, but give them the basics. I've sat with some children, some kids who are 13 and 14 years old, and they were unable to say the 5 pillars of Islam. They were almost at puberty, or they were almost 1 year away from puberty. That's too late, right? So Rasulullah is teaching us that this has to start pretty early. And then Rasulullah, after he caught his attention, he also told him, I shall teach you some words of advice. And this is also a prophetic tradition that we should all learn from when teaching somebody. You should give them the benefit. You tell them, I'm going to give you a good thing. So that basically they are giving you their full attention. So that their ears are fully attuned to what the Prophet ﷺ is going to tell them. And also Rasulullah ﷺ told him in a way that's going to be beneficial, and also told him it's not going to be long. He told him, إِنِّي أُعَلِّمُكَ كَلِمَاتٍ, few words. So this makes the kids, or whoever is going to be receiving whatever advice or teachings you're providing, attuned to what you are going to be saying, and at the same time feeling it's not going to be difficult. And you might even trigger them to say, if it's going to be few words, maybe I should memorize them. Maybe I should put them to heart. And that's what Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas did. He actually memorized what Rasulullah ﷺ told him, and then he conveyed it to us. And then the first command that Rasulullah ﷺ told him is, be mindful of Allah. احفظ الله يحفظ. In the Arabic language, ihfaz translates into preserve or guard. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-sufficient. Does it mean that Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas is going to be guarding Allah? Hasha lillah. The scholar said, ihfadillah means guard and preserve Allah's rights upon you. Guard and preserve Allah's religion. That's what you need to preserve. Be mindful of what Allah has commanded you. Be mindful of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited you from doing. And this has been narrated and has been mentioned in the Quran several times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Qaf, وَأُزْلِفَتِ الْجَنَّةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ غَيْرَ بَعِيدٍ هَذَا مَا تُوعَدُونَ لِكُلِّ أَوَّابٍ حَفِيظٍ مَنْ خَشِيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَجَاءَ بِقَلْبٍ مُنِيبٍ. So the Jannah may become closer to those who have taqwa, and their characteristics that they were awwab hafiz. Awwab is the person who often return to Allah in repentance, and those who are preserving their covenant with Allah. That's the word hafiz. That's another instance where the word hafiz has come in the Quran. Many things you have to preserve of Allah's rights. Other thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has specifically highlighted in the Quran is as-salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, حَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. Guard strictly, preserve your salah. Specifically, the middle salah, or the best salah, which is Salat al-Asr, according to the majority of the scholars. Rasulullah also said you should guard many things. I'm just trying to give you examples of the word guard that has come in the Quran and the Sunnah. Another thing that Rasulullah ordered us to guard is our wudu. Rasulullah ﷺ said, وَلَا يُحَافِظُ عَلَى الْوُضُوءِ إِلَّا مُؤْمِنٌ. Only the mu'min will preserve their ablution. Why? Because at any given point of time, nobody knows whether you have ablution or not except you. Right? So if you're always trying to preserve your ablution, this means you're always ready for ibadah. You're always ready for salah. The wudu itself is an action of ibadah. So this is another thing that Rasulullah ﷺ in the hadith actually asked us to preserve. Now, if you preserve the rights of Allah, if you guard the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what will you get in return? Al-jazā'u min jinsi al-amal. Your reward will always come from the same nature of the deed itself, from the same kind. So Rasulullah ﷺ said, احفظ الله يحفظك. And Allah will protect you. Very prevalent in the Quran. وَأَوْفُوا بِعَهْدِي وُوفِ بِعَهْدِكُمْ. Fulfill my covenant and my obligation, and I shall fulfill my covenant obligation to you, which is to give you the Jannah. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me, and I shall remember you. إِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنْصُرْكُمْ. If you help in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will help you. Now, when we talk about Allah protecting you, this can go into two main categories. And both of them we all need. He will protect you in the dunya, and most importantly, He will also protect you until you get to the Jannah, in al-akhirah. In this dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guard your worldly interest. He will guard your job. Many times you see some of your colleagues losing their jobs. And many times you feel that you should have lost your job, or you could have easily lost your job, but you did not. Who preserved this job for you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many times you're driving and you see, like in a foggy day or where it's snowing, and you see people having accidents and whatnot. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen you to be preserved on that day. Allah has preserved you. Allah is preserving your wife for you. Allah is preserving your kids for you. The kids. Look in our society, how many kids get astray, go to drugs, do illegal things, illicit things. And your kids, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved them for you. So this is one type of preservation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you. When you do this good deeds, when you're preserving the rights of Allah, this preservation is not only for you, it also goes to your offspring. The scholars, when they were talking about Surah Al-Kahf, and the treasure that Sayyidina Musa and Khadr, they built the wall to preserve what the treasure that was buried below it or beneath it. The Quran says, وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Their father was a pious man. He was a righteous man. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he preserved Allah by being pious and being righteous, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved his offspring. Some scholars said Abuhuma he was not their direct father. He was not the direct father of those kids. He was the sixth or the seventh grandfather. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can preserve your kids way, way after you have died, you and your sons and the sons of your sons. Sayyid ibn Musayyib was one of the tabi'een. He would say to his son, إِنِّي لَأَزِيدُ فِي صَلَاتِي مِنْ أَجْلِكَ. I am praying more, I'm doing more nawafil, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will preserve you. So that's one aspect of preservation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you in this dunya, preserving your worldly interests. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also will preserve you from deviation. Fitan al-shahawat or shubuhat. Basically the worldly lusts or innovations. Sayyidina Yusuf, when he was in a very difficult situation, we all know the story in Surah Yusuf. وَأَغْلَقَتِ الْأَبْوَابَ وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. She's a woman with beauty, money, power, and they're just by themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved him. What does the Quran say about this situation? كَذَلِكَ لِنَصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ. So we might turn away from him the evil and the illegal relationships, because surely he was one of our chosen and guided slaves. So that's also easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it difficult for you to make ma'asiyah. A more subtle preservation that sometimes we understand 2 or 3 years after, or even we never get to understand this. Sometimes you want to get a job, or sometimes you want to win a certain business, or do something in a worldly fashion. And then you have all the reasons for it to be successful, and then you don't get it. You don't get a job. You don't get the business successful. You don't get this. You don't get to travel this travel. And then you keep saying, I wish I did it, I wish I did it. From rahmatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he knows that if you get this halal thing, this job could be halal for you, or this travel could be halal for you, or this business could be halal for you. Eventually, it will lead you to more haram. Some people, when they have more money, or when they have more power, it becomes easier for them to fall to the haram. So sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only preserve you from the direct haram, He can also preserve you from certain halal things that He, in His ultimate wisdom and knowledge, knows that if you were to get it, you will eventually fall into sinning. So that's also from rahmatullah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this preservation. And then the most important preservation, which is related to the second part, which is preserving you on the akhirah, is Allah preserves your religion for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to die in a state of Islam and Iman. I'm sure you all have heard about stories about people, towards the end of their lives, they get worse. And some of them eventually, they leave Islam. And some of them in the history, they were actually very intellectuals, but there was something wrong in their hearts. There was something wrong with their deeds between them and Allah, and they were sulibul iman. Iman was taken away from them before they died. So one important aspect of preservation is Allah's preservation for your iman and Islam, so that you die and you meet Him as a Muslim and a mu'min. So, what does this mean? What happens if something bad happens to me then? Was the preservation taken off? Then you recite the ayah, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُو عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. Again, we said, الجزاء من جنس العمل. If you start deviating, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to bring you back to the right path, you will see a negative consequence of your bad deeds. Allah says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُو عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. Whatever misfortune befalls you, it is because of what your hands have earned. And Allah, He pardons much. Between you and yourself, remember your two most common mistakes that you do. Everybody knows his own mistakes and sins. And see how many times have you done them. And see how many times nothing happened to you. At some point of time, something will happen to you in return. Some misfortune will happen. But I want you to really ponder upon the last part. وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He pardons so much. One of the pious predecessors of Salaf al-Salih said, إِنِّي لَأَعْصِي اللَّهَ فَأَعْرِفُ ذَلِكَ فِي خُلُقِي خَادِمِي وَدَابَّتِي وَامْرَأَتِي. If I commit a sin, but those who were pious predecessors, like they were very close to Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not let them deviate for so long. He said, when I do a sin, let's say he was out, he had looked at something inappropriate, said something inappropriate, any kind of sin, he said, I would see the negative consequence and the impact of that directly in the behavior of my servants with me. They wouldn't be treating me well. In the behavior of my wife with me, she wouldn't be treating me well. And in the behavior of my dabba, his car, basically. So when that happens to you, if you do something bad and then you find something bad happening to you in return, this is actually a sign of rahmah, inshallah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing you back to the right path. Because what happens with the kuffar and the people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forsaken, they would basically be left. فَلَمَّا نَسُوا مَا ذُكِّرُوا بِهِ فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَبْوَابَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. When they have forgotten what we have ordered them to do, we've opened all the gates of good things for them. And then punishment would come all of a sudden. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you preserve the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will preserve you in this dunya, will preserve everybody around you in this dunya, and even will preserve your offspring, and then will preserve you as you die until you get, inshallah, safely to the heavens. So inshallah, we'll stop here, and next time we'll start from the next part of the hadith. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين